In a leaked video by fans from the stands, the NFL and the refs just got caught for fixing the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Philadelphia Eagles game in favor of the Eagles. But first, before I get more into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also like this video. Now, let's get right back into it. So, just on Sunday, when the Steelers took on the Eagles in Philadelphia for the Battle of Pennsylvania, it seemed like every single call that went wrong was against the Steelers, and it seemed like the Eagles could do nothing wrong. And it all started in the first half, the first quarter, with around 3 minutes left. The Pittsburgh Steelers caused 2 fumbles. The first fumble didn't go too well. They didn't get anything out of it in terms of points, got sacks, things like that. But the second time the Steelers caused the fumble, they got the ball within the 20, and the Steelers were rolling. They were getting ready to score a touchdown. But then a penalty happened. A fight broke out in the back of the end zone. Terrell Austin held his block a little bit too long, and he got an unnecessary roughness 15-yard penalty. But that's not even the thing that is the worst about this situation, because it's not a matter of fact of Terrell Austin getting a penalty. It's a matter of fact that the Eagles did not receive a penalty on the play after further review from New York, the refs back in New York, and also the refs on the field, because a video by fans was posted after the game of the scrum, and on the field it said that Terrell Austin, he committed a penalty. Kelvin Austin, he came in there, pushed a guy, he committed another personal foul, 15-yard penalty. But no penalty was handed out to the Eagles because no punches were thrown. That's what was said by the refs. No punches were thrown, nothing illegal was done by the Eagles players in the scrum. And they reviewed this back in New York, and they confirmed it, saying that the Eagles did nothing wrong. Well, obviously, they did do something wrong, because the Eagles' scrum with the Steelers was leaked after the game by the fans, and it was obviously shown that Darius Slay, the main person in the play, alongside Terrell Austin, the person getting blocked, threw a punch at Terrell Austin. Terrell Austin didn't do anything. He just held his block, but Darius Slay is the one who threw the punch. But on the field, they said no one threw a punch. After the game, the ref said in his interview about the scrum that New York confirmed no punches were thrown. But in the video, it clearly was shown Darius Slay threw the punch at Terrell Austin, so that was not called. Not even just that, another punch was thrown on the play. The Eagles player who got in the scrum with Kelvin Austin after Kelvin Austin pushed the guy. Yes, Kelvin Austin deserved that 15-yard penalty for pushing the guy. But once again, it's not about that. It's about it not being offsetting penalties, because the Eagles player who got pushed retaliated by throwing a punch at Kelvin Austin. So I'm guessing this is just boxing and you're allowed to throw punches. Since when in the NFL is this allowed? Punches are usually thrown out. You could be ejected for it. And 2 players on the Eagles not only weren't even given penalties, but they could have been ejected for the game. But no, nothing was called on the field. The Steelers were set back, and they got a 15-yard penalty, put them out of touchdown range, and had them kick a field goal to end the drive. So another drive just ended by the refs, and it just seems like that just happened all game. And the refs, the fact that they said after the game that New York helped them, and they confirmed everything that the refs actually saw on the field was correct, it just doesn't make sense. Because how can a video come out after the game from the fans' perspective, and being that you're an NFL company, a billion-dollar company, and you have cameras all over the field that you can't see the punches being thrown, especially because it was done by the main person who was involved in the play. And if you called the penalty on Terrell Austin and Kelvin Austin, that means you were looking at those 2 players. And if both the players that they went up against in the scrum threw in punches, that means you had to have seen it, but it just wasn't called. But enough with that one. Let's move over to the TJ Watt injury, because that's another thing that took place. On the play where TJ Watt got injured and he went down with his ankle injury, and it looked to be a severe injury until later known it was just an ankle twist, ankle turn, and he should be fine. You look at that injury that happened, and he got held 100% on that play. TJ Watt is the best defensive player in the league, and I could only remember one holding penalty that the refs have called on an opposing opponent against TJ Watt all season long. Not just in one game, but all season long. And once again, against Lane Johnson holds TJ Watt most of the game and injures TJ Watt because of it. Now, this isn't, I'm not throwing any shade on Lane Johnson, because obviously you could hold someone if you feel as though they're going to get to the quarterback and you want to prevent a sack, you prevent the quarterback from getting hit. Yes, you could take that penalty sometimes, but they just didn't call it. The refs just doesn't call anything. Lane Johnson held him multiple times. Other players around the league have held TJ Watt multiple times, and if you could get away with it, sure, why not do it? So Lane Johnson's in the clear for there. But the refs, on the other hand, they need to call the penalty because TJ Watt gets injured on the play. And when you're being held back and has an arm around your neck as you're trying to get to the quarterback, you're preventing someone from running full speed. So injuries could happen, but the refs just don't call it. The refs just don't call it against TJ Watt. TJ Watt never gets holding calls anymore. It seems as though a few years ago, he used to always get those holding penalty calls against the right tackle going up against him. But now that he's the best player in the league, it just seems like they just look the opposite way and never call that. But it just doesn't make sense, and TJ Watt gets injured in the play, and it just seems as though the game against the Eagles was just fixed in favor of the Eagles all game. Every single penalty. And it's not even that they didn't call the holding penalty, it's that they don't call that penalty and don't call the ones that happen all game that the Eagles players are doing, but then they call it against the Steelers to push them back all the time. For example, Dan Moore Jr., he gets called for a holding penalty and makes it end up a 3rd and 18 at one point in the game. And then there's also penalties called on Broderick Jones and things like that. So it just doesn't make sense. It also called a play. Another one that they called was tripping on Zach Frazier. Another play that you could say was fixed, because Zach Frazier is falling to the ground, not even looking at the Eagles defender that's being blocked. He just falls to the ground. His leg comes up a little bit as you're falling to protect yourself, but they called tripping on the play. 15-yard penalty, sets the Steelers back, and then the game's basically over. So that's basically what happens for the Steelers. Every single penalty was called against them. I know this sounds like complaining, but at some point it gets ridiculous because no calls go in Steelers' favor ever, but every call against the Steelers always happens, and especially those holding penalty calls. Zach Frazier, that tripping penalty was not tripping. He wasn't even paying attention. He fell to the ground. His leg came up a little bit, but still, he wasn't even looking to see where the defender at. How can you trip someone if you don't even know where that person is? And that's what was called. Took Steelers out of range. And then the penalty on Dan Moore Jr., another 3rd and long. You also look at the no punch call, another penalty against Steelers. So just everything that happened that game was in favor of the Eagles. And I'm not going to sit here and act like the Steelers played a really good game on offense. They didn't. But at the same time, all those offensive penalties that were called against the Steelers, they could have put up more points. You look at the team and you look at, hey, they weren't able to put up points this game. But if those penalties weren't called against the Steelers, or at least offsetting penalties, or the holding penalty was called against the Eagles, you look at those drives, and those drives could have ended much quicker for the Eagles, and points wouldn't have been on the board for the Eagles, and then points would have been more on the board for the Steelers if those tripping penalties and that offsetting penalty was called. So you could just look at it multiple ways and say, hey, the Steelers didn't play their best game, but things could have been way different if things were just called right and things weren't fixed by the Eagles and the NFL for this game. One last thing I want to point out before I end this video is Kelvin Austin just today. He spoke about the little scrum that broke out against the Eagles, and he said this. He saw a bunch of Eagles players against his teammates, and he came in there to defend his teammates, and I guess the refs called the penalty on him because he's the biggest guy on the field. And he said that as a joke. Obviously, Kelvin Austin, he's the littlest guy on the field. He's 5'8", 5'9", and he's saying that the refs called a penalty on him because he's the biggest guy. But no, they called it on the littlest guy on the field. They called a penalty on him when he's going up against all these 6-foot people, going up against them, trying to defend his teammate. But no, the 5'9", 5'8" guy got the penalty, but the people who are bigger throwing punches don't get the penalty. It just doesn't make sense. So, with that being said, Kelvin Austin, he gave a little joke about that situation, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about this game in general. Do you believe this game was fixed by the refs and the NFL and the New York refs as well against the Steelers? Do you believe the Eagles should have won this game if all those penalties weren't in favor of them? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, what you think and what you make of this game. And do you agree with my take on it? Steelers could have easily still lost the game, sure, but it was made much harder against them. That's all I'm saying. So with that being said, that's the end of this video, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and also make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports, everything surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. I cover it. I'll continue to cover it as we head into the playoffs here shortly, and the off season, everything like that. So stay tuned to the channel for everything Steelers, especially if you want to listen and watch Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates and not have to read it. And like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, I'll see you guys all later. Until the next video, I'm out. Peace.